I'm Pamela Portnoy, and no one's okay. Welcome back to No One's Okay. We are back, and that is the first time I have heard the music in the intro like this while we're recording. It's very exciting, I have to say. It's a total bouncy hit. What do you call it when it's a bop? Is that what the cool kids say?
It's a bop.
I'm here today with Daniel Zucker. He is a writer, a producer, a director. Welcome.
Hey, thanks. Good to be here.
So happy to have you. Tell us a little bit about your journey. Where did you start? How did it get you here? Bring it. Let's go.
Okay. Sure. Well, I've always loved stories. I think that's where it always begins. It begins with loving something and having a passion for it. And I grew up with that. You know, like I was always a movie fan, TV fan, as long as I can remember. I've been writing screenplays. Well, I wrote shorts and shot shorts with my friends in high school, which a lot of people do. I wrote my first feature screenplay when I was 18, and it was a really amazing. I really remember the process of writing it very clearly because it was like the first time in my life when for 3 months I wasn't bored. I always had something to work on, you know, and I'd never had something like that where I just had this living thing going on in the background of my life where if I had a few minutes, I could go and work on it.
Yeah.
And I remember that was like the first experience I remember of having a script to write. And so, you know, I wrote it. It was bad, but I liked it, and I liked doing it, and so I kept writing. I went to college. I didn't go to film school. I studied everything because I thought that it would serve me to know about the world, right? To expose myself to all kinds of different things at a liberal arts school, and hoping that when I graduated, I would have something to say.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was the right call. I moved out to LA knowing I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to be directing, but not really knowing where to start. I think like if the way I sort of visualized it, my experience was like I stood, at one end of a football field, and I could see in the distance the other end zone, right? My dream. And then everything in the, like where I was very clear and where I wanted to be was very clear. And everything in the middle was just this sort of like miasma, this haze of confusion and cloud. And I just knew I wanted to go that way, but I didn't know how.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was writing at night. I worked as an assistant. I was an intern first. And I worked at production companies and, temped for producers and stuff like that. And I was just really developing my craft. And then things kind of came together for me. I started writing with a friend of mine. And we, long story short, we wrote One Good Thing. And that one good thing got into the hands of a coordinator at an agency who liked it and saw promise in us and passed it up, and they signed us. And so I became a repped professional writer when I was 24.
Hell yeah.
And the first thing that happens when an agent signs you as a writer is they say, okay, what's next? Like, what's your next script? And you're like, I just wrote.
This is the one.
This is what I just spent 9 months writing this. Let's do this. And they're like, no. What's next? And that's a wake up call.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I spent some time doing generals, developing my voice with my writing partner, and we got really lucky. We staffed on a CW series called The Messengers in 2014. And that was a dream come true. I remember like jumping like 6 feet off the ground, like when we got that phone call. And that got us into the Writers Guild and just really started us from there. I staffed again after that and started developing, writing movies and writing television. I wrote with my partner for, I want to say 5 years before we kind of amicably went our separate ways to explore different kinds of things. And in the years since, I've been full-time as a solo writer for 4 years now. And that's a whole different thing that we can also talk about.
Oh, we're going to talk about it. I have so many questions.
I hope that was okay.
That was more than okay, because it's not just okay. It was more than okay.
Oh, cool.
Very good. I'm really embarrassed. Did I say your full name at the beginning of the show? I was so distracted by the intro music. I know I said you're a writer, producer, director.
I think you did.
I said Daniel Zucker. Guys, this is Daniel Zucker, in case you didn't know.
That's me.
I was very distracted by the new high-tech intro that Jason had going for us. I was very excited.
I'm pretty sure you did.
Okay, good. Thank God, because I'd be mortified if I didn't.
No
and
worries.
I have done that before with guests, and that was just, I am a human woman. Shit happens. Okay, first question for you, sir.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you staffed on the Messengers.
Yeah.
Okay, I feel like a lot of people look at the writer's room with this like mystique that surrounds it, this kind of unknowing and this like allure. Can you
Sure.
demystify it a little bit? Like, what does it look like? What's it like being on a writer's staff?
Yeah, so I know, first of all, I know what it's like to be in a room, and I also know what it's like to want to be in a room, because I wanted to be, and I dreamed of that for so long before I actually scored that elusive gig. A writer's room is pretty much very simple. There's a main space which has a very long table in it, a big table with seats around. I should also say that the size of a writer's room varies. Some shows have big staffs. These days, shows tend to have smaller staffs of just a couple writers. But for the most part, that writer's room has a big table. Part of your day is spent in that room with the full group, and the rest of your workday is in your little, your own personal office, which is sort of an offshoot of that central space. What happens is, and this is a sort of generalization, because every show is different and every story is different and requires different storytelling process. But for the most part, a writing staff breaks the macro arc of the season, for instance, as a group. The creator, the showrunner, will probably have a vision for that season and know sort of major turns or have hopes or suggestions.
Character arcs, things like that.
Right, like what. And they can have like a very clear vision for the season or a pretty vague one, but anyway, the group works together to create that sort of larger storytelling arc from episode 1 to the last episode, trying to uplift and support the showrunner or the creator's vision. It's a when you're on staff, you are an individual. You have your own gifts and your own talents and your own interests, but the story that you're telling is in service to the showrunner's vision for that show, and that's something that I really like about the experience of writing on staff, because I'm a very collaborative person, and I like helping other people achieve their dreams,
Mhm.
but I also like, it's fun to build the mousetrap as a group. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. So what would it be, because you were on that staff
Yeah.
for how many seasons again? Remind me. One?
One.
One season.
Mhm.
But I know that you are credited for certain episodes in particular. How
Yeah.
does that get kind of sussed out?
Great. Thank you. So, yes, so what we'll do is as a group, we'll break out that macro arc where, let's, if to use an example from The Shield, this is the season where Vic Mackey gets investigated by a really sharp cop at Internal Affairs. And this guy almost gets him, and it's a will they, won't they of will the cop be successful. That might, so let's say that's your macro thing. The showrunner then delegates episodes to each individual writer on staff. So for instance, if we're on a writing staff and I'm the showrunner, I'll say, okay, I'm writing 1. Pamela, you're going to write 2,
Sure.
right? Jason, you're going to write 3. I'll go 4, and then Pamela is going to write 5.
Mhm.
And you say, great, awesome, thank you.
I'm on it.
And yes, and sometimes when you set out to write your episode, all you know is where the last one ended and where the next one has to begin. And in the case of The Messengers, this was pretty much the way, that was the experience of that show. You have to come up with a pitch. Sometimes it's a group thing. Sometimes you're given the story, but for the most part, like you'll come up with your vision for that episode. The room will break what has to happen. And then so much of it comes from you of, right. You then have to beat that episode out, put it up on the board in the writer's room, like on a dry erase board or with cards. You have to pitch that story to the showrunner and the rest of the staff, and they vet it, and you guys refine that story together. And then once you have your beats done, you'll write an outline, which is usually the first prose document you'll write. And, when you're sort of excused from the big room and you go into your private quarters. That outline gets notated by studio, network, producers, and the other writers. So you're constantly getting feedback and having to make changes. And then when the outline is in a great spot and everyone is really happy with it, you're sent off to script. And you'll usually, in my experience, I've had like 5 days to write the script, 5 to 7. Something like that.
Yeah. Wow.
And
That's fast turnaround.
yeah, and it's interesting. Like when you become a professional writer, that's a skill that like I forget the turn of phrase, but basically like your ability to do that. If ideally you meet that moment, you learn how to write good stuff on time, and yeah, so I'm knock wood. I've always been on schedule. Never been late.
Hell yeah. How did it feel the first time that you were pitching that outline in the room for the first time?
I remember. So I was the youngest writer on that staff, and that happened again also on the next show that I worked on called Blood Drive.
Yeah.
And it's exciting. It's scary, of course. I always feel no matter what job I do, I always have a very strong desire to do a good job. I want the people that hired me, I want to, deliver on that promise, and make them feel confident that they made the right move choosing me. So it was good. I remember working really hard with my partner to refine that pitch. We practiced it together. We sort of split up sections of the pitch to present, as I recall, and then you roll the dice. I've been so lucky to work in good rooms with great showrunners who are very supportive. And on that first show, my showrunner, Trey Calloway, he was the best person to um, introduce me to that world of television writing because he was so supportive and understanding because he'd done it for a long time, so he knew what it was like to be a young first timer, like being like, oh God, I have to now do this and hopefully do a good job. And I did.
Of course you did. That's awesome. You mentioned that the last, ever since that you've been on your own with the writing process, since you've stepped away from writers' rooms, your process has been different and it's been a whole nother ballgame.
It has.
Talk to me.
It's really interesting. And I wasn't expecting this. So I wrote with my partner for a long time. Mm-hmm. And we had our process was ingrained by the time that we went our separate ways. So, we broke. It's called breaking story. So we broke story by sitting on a couch, a lot like this, looking at each other and talking, and passing a laptop back and forth, taking notes. And then, one of us would turn those notes put them in, chronological order, turn it into a skeleton, and go from there. When I began writing by myself, I had to, first of all, relearn how to write, this time as an individual, which is very different. And I had to find my voice as an individual writer, and that was not necessarily the same voice I, used in my partnership.
Because you kind of found, where you would fit into each other's styles, like puzzle pieces in a way?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's interesting. When you become a rep writer and your reps start putting you out, it helps them if you have a brand. They're able to sell you. It's similar to being an actor, right? Or I would imagine a director too. So we were the sci-fi guys. Right?
And, yeah, the sci-fi guys.
And we got work in that genre, based on that brand and our good material. When I parted ways with him, I had to generate individual scripts that came just from me. I couldn't use the things that I'd done with him. And those stories were not necessarily going to be science fiction. I had to figure out, who Danny is. Does that make sense?
It does.
And it took a year, actually. It was a very hard year where I kind of had to step away, not be out for staffing gigs, and having to relearn how to go from idea to finished screenplay completely by myself.
What did you find when you had to sit down and figure out who Danny is?
So I knew I had a story in mind that I wanted to write, that I had thought of during my time as a member of a team, but that he and I weren't going to work on together. And when we parted ways, I think the very next day I started working on this story that had been bouncing around in my head. It was hard. I remember I was so used to being able to talk out ideas with another person, and I no longer had that. So what I did was I used a legal pad. I grabbed a yellow legal pad and I just started writing longhand, essentially just having a conversation with myself on paper. So I would write down an idea and then I would think about it and then respond to that idea as if I were in dialogue, with someone else, but it was me. And it was strange. It was stressful to have to relearn because I didn't, and also that it wasn't like a given that I was going to be able to do it. I had to. It was really like a leap of faith to have to restart my career 5 or 6 years into it and rebrand and reimagine myself. It was hard.
Yeah, I imagine. It sounds like particularly when you're working alone, I feel
Yeah.
like this goes when you're working in a writer's room as well. Writing just takes an insane amount of discipline. I mean, everything does, but I feel like particularly when you're alone. And you mentioned before that you feel like you have something always driving you to like keep you, creating. For me, when I have something long term, sometimes if it starts getting a little bit murky, it feels like this heavy shadow, like, oh, I have this thing. How have you maintained a healthy relationship with the long term writing style that you have?
For sure. Well, it goes back to, so when I was 24 and I got repped by an agency. I was still a writer's assistant at the time. The show that I was working on came to an end, and I had this uh, moment where it was a very organic break. Like I could go and seek another assistant job with steady pay and health benefits. And one of the hardest nights of my life and most consequential was the night I decided not to seek another assistant job and to instead roll the dice and be a full-time writer. It was one of the hardest things I wrestled with up to that point, and it was the most important decision I have made. It was absolutely the right call, and through the ups and downs, and I've had really good times and really hard times, but I've never regretted that because that was absolutely the right call to make. Starting the next day, here's what happens. You wake up and you have this realization that, okay, I can't, if I want to make rent, if I want to buy groceries, if I want to, buy a new pair of shoes when these sneakers wear out, I have to earn a living. And the only way that I can do that is by writing something amazing and selling it or using it as a writing sample to get a job. That impetus was there from the very next morning through now. I realized I had to treat it like a full-time job. So I write every day from about 7 to lunchtime. And I have almost every day since, including weekends. And so that's about 10 years now, which is crazy. It's cool to be here. But yeah, for 10 years, I've been doing this full time. That experience that you're referring to, that shadow, I know it very well. And I think a lot of people do. I think that I remember it, I once thought of it, I gave it a name. I called it the anxiety monster. And
Yes.
I kind of had this epiphany at a certain point when I realized like that anxiety monster is just a part of the process. It's just part of it. It's never going to go away. You can't completely erase your natural worry or concern about like your dwindling savings account. You At a certain point, I found I just had to throw my arms around it and embrace it and recognize, look, that is the anxiety monster. He's a friend. He's a funny friend who sometimes
Is annoying.
annoys me, but he can be managed. And if you don't feed him too much, he doesn't get bigger.
Yeah.
Like it's just like I think I changed I really struggled with that, and I think a lot of people do until I sort of figured out a way to think of it in a new framing. And once I kind of gave it a name, and I was like, okay, there's the anxiety monster. He's standing in the corner while I'm writing, but he's over there, and he's not over my shoulder.
Just stay over there.
Right, like it's silly, but it helped. And at a certain point, I don't know, I got used to it. I just stopped. I didn't worry so much about making rent. I didn't worry about a lot of the things that bothered me at the beginning. And now I've done it long enough that I'm used to it. I'm used to waking up early and writing every day, and I'm used to using this as my sole form of income.
That's amazing. I feel like a lot of people could easily look at that monster in the corner of the room and kind of cower, but I feel like it's a choice to a certain extent.
It is, but it's also hard to see that it's a choice. Like, I don't blame people for worrying, because I worried about.
It's heavy.
It's hard. It's not easy, and also, we live in a society where not a lot of people do what we do, and a lot of most of us have family from elsewhere in the country who hear about their relative who's moving to Los Angeles to work in entertainment, and they're like, we all know that feeling of like the sort of
eye roll,
the sort of condescension of like, I've heard that's a hard business, and
what's your plan B?
And that sound where they do that inhale through the teeth, which it picks up good on the mic, but I hate that. But we all know that, and like so that is just to say, there are internal obstacles and external ones that we deal with as creatives, and it's tough. It takes a lot of dedication, bravery, endurance, and faith.
I love that answer. That's very good. What do you do in particular to combat writer's block? Do you get it? What does it look like?
I do get it. It's a good question. First of all, I think what I do is I come from a place where I'm kind to myself. Like, if there's a day where I'm like, there'll be a day where I write. My daily average is about 7 pages of when I'm on script. Some days I'll write 9 or 11, and I'll really pat myself on the back and say that's awesome. Some days I'll write 1 or 2. Some days I like some days I'm when I'm breaking story, plot is sometimes hard.
You make it sound like news. I love it. Just breaking story.
I know, right? Well, sometimes like making a feature film plot make sense is very hard, and sometimes you'll reach these bumps where it takes a few days to work it out, to take your legal pad and write down 13 options for where the story can go, and you don't like any of them until the next morning you wake up and you think of number 14, which would never have occurred to you. So to answer your question, I'm kind to myself. I'm also patient, because I've done this long enough where I know that if the idea isn't coming to me on Wednesday, it'll come to me on Thursday, more often than not. I also find it's helpful to have a slate of projects, to have a number of irons in the fire, and be writing or developing ideas that are different from each other. Because let's say the policy show that you're writing, you're not feeling that one today, and you can't really get into that DC mindset, so you go and you work on your murder mystery, and that one, or your steamy romance, whatever, your alien abduction movie, And like,
Do you have a steamy romance right now
I
in the
don't.
works?
I don't think so.
Okay.
No, it's you know.
You're gonna have to send it over
I
if
know.
you ever do.
You'll greenlight it.
Okay.
You're the only one who would. Uh, but being, having multiple tonal things to work on also helps.
I like that a lot. I have a friend that's an author, a dear friend of mine, and he used to combat writer's block by throwing axes in the woods to a target. He would just do that for a couple hours to kind of clear his head.
That's neat. I've struggled. It's taken me days sometimes to figure out things. I wrote a murder mystery movie last year, and it took a long time to figure out who the killer was. And to arrange the ending so that there was a twist and that twist would be satisfying and surprising.
So you were well into it before you even decided who it was.
That was the last thing I figured out.
Really?
It was. And you know what's really interesting is like I knew I had certain instincts. Like I didn't want to introduce a new character. I wanted it to be someone who was already in the story. And so I made a list. Like that was something I could do. I was like, okay, there's 14, 15 voices, let's say. So it's got to be one of these people. And then I'm like, wait, what if it's the guy himself? What if maybe it was a suicide? And like maybe it was a freak accident. Like I had to think of every possibility before I found the right one. And the right one was the last one I thought of.
Amazing.
And it was also the one the idea that scared me the most because I didn't want it. Like I felt like that revelation would really hurt. It hurt me to conceive of it, and so I resisted it. It was really interesting, but the idea that I'd resisted was the one that ended up being right.
Oh, nice. I know that you tend to have a darker tone with your writing, right? You've been writing some psychological thrillers, if I remember correctly.
I have been doing that. Yeah.
So your murder mystery, is that kind of a darker murder mystery or kind of a la Knives Out with comedic elements?
I was really inspired. So it's definitely darker, but it's a little bit tongue in cheek. I like, something I really like about my portfolio is that no two scripts are really the same. Like the tone of each one is really unique, and it's also something that I have to find. For instance, like with this one, we're talking about like the straight. I tried it like a straight, dark, scary one, and it didn't work. And then I tried it with a buddy element that was funnier, and that one worked better. And it, so I tried the prisoners route, because Denis Villeneuve is my favorite director, and nice. I tried that, and that one didn't really work. And then I went more of like a Coen Brothers direction, in my dreams, and and yes. That one just sort of happened. That seemed to kind of bring it all together.
Amazing. I want like the steamy romance murder mystery
I'll do that
version.
Next. There were a lot of those movies like when I was a kid, like in the late 80s and early 90s, like that sort of like erotic thriller movie like was very popular. Like they made tons of these, a lot of Adrian Lyne movies and stuff.
Yeah, and I just was watching a lot of like the Michael Douglas movies.
Like, that was a genre that was very popular for a long time, and for some reason it's sort of like fallen by the wayside. Yeah. But it's like I agree with you. It's due for
they have a resurgence. Certain feel to them that is that right? Just movies that aren't afraid to get steamy and crazy, because I feel like for what is it? He did like Fatal Attraction. He did The Game. He did what was the other one with
Are you talking about Michael Douglas?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was another one with Sharon Stone. What's the one? Basic Instinct.
Okay.
Like those movies all have like a particular vibe, and I watch them and I'm like, they're not making movies like this. Like, and I don't know what this means in particular.
It's a genre, like the same way noir kind of fell out of popularity.
Yeah.
And then occasionally you'll see kind of like a throwback movie come out, uh, Ryan Johnson's movie Brick was a really good example of that, which was, that was the first noir movie made in a really long time, and it was different because his was set in a high school, and that had never been done before. And he found a way to sort of take that genre that a lot of people like and turn it on its head and make it new. I think he did it again with Knives Out, and that's why he's amazing. That's
Hell
why we
yeah.
love him. He's
We
great.
love him. I know we also love you're an Aaron Sorkin fan as well.
I think every writer has to be an Aaron Sorkin fan.
Thank you. Sometimes I get people like don't give me beef, but like they're like, "Oh, you've been watching a
he's
lot of
great.
Newsroom," and I'm like, "Yes."
I
What's
like
wrong
that
with
show
that?
too. That show was really good.
It's probably it's hard to say what my favorite drama is, but I'd probably say it's top 2, top 3 shows that I
Newsroom?
love.
I really
Yes.
liked that show a lot.
Yes.
Something I really liked about it was that it felt more modern than, like West Wing is amazing, but it was
I
also
still watch
made.
it.
I still do too, but it was also like made a long time ago
Mhm.
when, the cameras they used were different. I think they shot it on film. It looks like it looks like a story from another era, and Newsroom was now, and it looked like a show made now. And it also showed that his voice and his vision are timeless.
100%. And I feel like a lot of people look at it like as idealistic because a lot of the themes around it are morality, decency, honesty. And I think that's wonderful. And there should be more of that.
I agree.
I love that. What would you say to someone who was trying to tackle their first screenplay? I know that a lot of people have had project babies in the past year. What's your advice to someone starting off?
Dive right in.
Go.
Yes, just go. Know that it won't be good. Probably. Your rough first draft, like that's just about getting to fade out, right? It's not going to be good. And it's not supposed to be. That was something I had to learn, right? Like the first time I ever wrote a script, now, a long time ago, I reached the end, and that I felt that wave of accomplishment, and I was like, it's done. And it was not done. Like, it should not have been read by anyone other than me. But I had to learn that, that revisions process, rewriting it, tearing that first rough draft apart and rebuilding it into something better is not only necessary, but also pleasurable. It's essential to refine it into something that first of all can get you work, and that also can be sold. I don't think, I've yet to read the rough first draft that kind of is done. I don't think that exists.
Yeah.
So to answer that question deeper, yeah, like throw yourself into it. The best thing you can do for your story is to write it. I would also immerse myself. I think if I were doing it, starting over and doing it for the very first time, I would really be reading scripts, a lot of them. I did that the first several years as a writer's assistant, and even before that as an intern at production companies. I was reading scripts every day. I read thousands, without exaggeration. I read thousands of scripts. I read good ones, I read bad ones, I read great ones. I read my heroes. I found out which writers I really wanted to emulate. I kind of observed how people tell stories visually with just a couple of words. Some writers are very, they write these dense blocks of text, and others just write a word or two. And I remember really liking that. I loved seeing how different individuals bring their own spin and approach to what is essentially like a standard document, like a script. Has the same few core components, and it's what you do inside it that really makes that's what makes you you as a writer.
Mm-hmm.
A lot, I think, a lot like how an actor gets sides and does a read or prepares an audition, and it's like the words are on the paper, but the words are not the character. It's what you bring to it. It's the surprises that you find inside it. That's what makes a character alive.
Yes.
And I think that that's very much how it is when you're writing too.
How does it feel? How do you feel about the 10,000 hours to mastery?
It's definitely accurate.
Yeah.
I had to do that with my partner, and then I had to do it again as an individual.
Mm-hmm.
I think it took, the longer that I do this, the more I have perspective on my past, and I'm able to see, like, when once we hit 10,000 hours of sitting alone in a room with each other, like our communication improved. Like we got faster, we got clearer, we kind of knew what the other person was what they were going to pitch next and how they were going to build on ideas. And then, like, as an individual, I think that was one reason why it took me a year of writing every single day, just to be able to restart the engine after having to turn it off. 10,000 for sure. It's a thing.
Amazing. I did have another. Oh, yes. Here we go. This is my last writer question before I move into a next segment. Okay. So you mentioned that you got to be willing to like tear it apart, rebuild. So you can't be precious about any of it, right? Question mark.
You can. The short answer is no. You can't really be precious. There are. The way that I would sort of think about it is that there are ideas that you love more than others. Mm-hmm. Right? So like your central premise, like the way to identify which ideas to keep, for me, it's like oftentimes like, what was the idea that got me excited about writing this in the first place? Also, what was the first idea that I had? And those two aren't necessarily the same thing. In the case of this murder mystery that I wrote, it's basically about a couple of friends who are trying to solve the murder of somebody that they knew. And I really liked that. I liked the theme of friendship. I also liked the sort of this idea that while these people are unraveling a mystery, they're also processing this loss, this hole that has been left in their lives with the absence of this victim. So I really liked those things and some other ideas, but everything outside of that was malleable. I tried things where like one of them's married, where both of them are, where neither of them are. I also played with like how they're related to each other. And anything can change. And I think it's, knowing what to change and what to keep, that comes with experience. It's also instinct and a lot of trial and error. I think that no one should ever be afraid of being wrong or making a mistake. I think it's one of the biggest things that, I had to do when I first started out doing this professionally, was I had to like be okay with making mistakes, being okay with letting people read things that maybe weren't 100% perfect, and learning like when to let go of ideas. I think being precious is something that people experience at the beginning of their journeys, and then with experience they find that it's not sustainable and they have to let it go.
So do you ever feel like really done with a project once you're
Like when I finish, right? Like,
yeah.
yeah, I do. I think, like a script. So here's the fun thing, right? A script is in itself innately a work in progress. It is not the finished thing. The finished thing ideally is
On the screen.
on screen, right? So like no matter what, I know that even if I sell this, even if this gets packaged with actors and director and someone buys it, it's going to change anyway. It has to change to suit people's tastes. It also has to change because of the limitations of production. I'll have to rewrite whole sequences because we built a standing set and I have to use that set. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so like now I know that and I'm comfortable with that. And I think for me, it's like I'll work on a thing until I just either don't want to anymore, or I just like, I can't conceivably like find anything else that's wrong with it. Like I'll fix it until I can identify nothing else to fix. And then I give it to, my readers and I await their judgment, their feedback. And what's neat about that is a fresh set of eyes inevitably shows me things that I overlooked.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that. I love, I love being wrong. I love that experience because I like learning. I like figuring out, oh, dang, I made that wrong turn. Here's how I make it right. And then I carry that forward with me. I really love that process of innovation.
I had the opportunity to go see a taping of Will and Grace before the pandemic. And what blew me away, aside from like watching how talented the actors are, because I'm big fans of all of them, was in between, setups, all the writers would just huddle together and talk to each other about what the audience was and was not laughing at. And then they would change lines on the fly accordingly, tell the actors, and the actors would just do the lines on the fly. And I think that was like crazy and amazing because you're getting the feedback from the audience.
I love that. And it's also something I really like about the process of being in a writer's room, because when you do pitch that story, inevitably someone with a fresh perspective will see it in a new way, or see things, see mistakes you made, see plot holes, see, but also good things too, like, narrative mirrors, things like, oh, that relationship sort of resembles this other one. You could sort of put those as parallels, and that sort of strengthens and deepens the story. And then if those two relationships end in different ways, that also helps. It gives your story a nice, a balance, and it can help you identify themes. So I love that. I love that process of innovation. I love the collaborative aspect of what we do, because I like being with people creating something great.
I love that. Your passion always seeps out of you every time I talk to you about writing.
Awesome.
Okay, so I have a segment that I'm toying around with, and maybe you can help me out with the title because I don't know if it's appropriate, but we'll get through it and then you can tell me if I need to rename it. So I was calling it, for the last 3 episodes, Silly Questions to Take Seriously. But my questions are never that silly because questions...
I'm serious. Just lay them on me.
Okay,
here we go.
What's your favorite reptile and why is it a tortoise?
So Pamela's referring to my family's giant pet land tortoise, and he's turning 29 this year. He's
29.
He's really big. We got him when he hatched, and he could fit in your palm. And now he's well over 100 pounds. He's really big, and he lives in the backyard. And something that I do really like about him, no joke, totally serious, is I think that he experiences time differently than we do because he takes life slower. So he'll like, he's totally lazy. He's like the dude in Big Lebowski. Like he'll like sunbathe until noon, then he'll have a bite, then he'll take a nap, then he'll like walk
By the
around.
time you're done with your workday, he's just getting started.
And then, right. And then he'll go to bed at like 4, and then that's his day. But, and so that's funny, but also like, here's what I would have you imagine. Imagine you're sitting in the backyard and you have a pad and you're working on a story.
Okay.
And you have this large lumbering dinosaur walking around you.
Magic.
He has taught me, totally serious, he's taught me to sort of slow down. He's taught me to, because he's not in a rush about anything, you know? And so when I say I think he experiences time differently than we do, it must be because he's just more patient. He's slower. He's never running to anything. And and I definitely have that impulse where I can be very excited and eager to get to the next place or go do the next thing that I know I have coming up. And to sit and just be around a presence like that, you sort of soak up that patience by osmosis. It's hard to explain, but it just, you kind of match him in his Zen stillness, and your thinking also slows down, not just physically, but the way you ideate slows down and it becomes very deliberate. And so that would be my answer.
Wow, that was beautiful. I loved that answer.
Cool. Awesome.
Wow. Okay. Well done. Tell me about what you love about learning to cook Japanese food.
Oh, this is also great. So Pamela is referring to one of my pandemic hobbies, which was I got it's called a donabe, and I make traditional Japanese hot pot like shabu shabu or nabemono. And what I love about that is I really love the order of operations. In order to make a hot pot full of delicious food, you have to follow a set number of steps and do things in a particular order. That hot pot contains, anywhere from like 5 to 10 ingredients, and each of those ingredients has a different cooking time, right? You also have to make the broth ahead of time, right? And you have to, prepare your mise en place, like cut all your vegetables up and prep your meat, and then, start the cooking process, layering in those ingredients one at a time based on their cooking time. And then the last thing you do, it's really fun, you take that heavy clay pot lid and you cover the donabe and you let all of it steam together for a few minutes. Then what you do is you kill the heat, you bring that pot to the table where your guests are awaiting you, and then you remove the lid, and it's a flourish, right? It's a prestige at the end of a magic trick because you're greeted with this like dramatic theatrical white plume of steam, and everyone goes, ooh.
Can you do a reenactment of how you lift the lid?
It's like your video audience will see this, but it's like it's just a very, I'm not a clown, but it's like it's a deliberate action, like it's a performance. There's something dramatic about it,
For sure.
and there's a lot of anticipation, and that I think that's really part of that experience. It's an important part. So when you remove it, it's like it's a dramatic thing. This plume of steam comes out, and then everyone goes ooh, and then the steam clears. It's like the curtains are drawn away and you're presented with your dinner.
And it also takes time.
Yeah.
for the steam to clear away. So that's another way to slow down.
Sure. I like the thematic link there.
It's
It
about
is.
patience.
It is. It is. And
savoring.
it is. I really like doing things properly. I like the order. I like order. I like knowing that, like a pilot script has 60 pages, right?
Mhm.
And it has scene headings, description, it has characters and dialogue, and maybe transitions. And that's it. And I have 60 pages to tell you a story. And it's whatever I do inside that, that I'm gonna, that's me, and that's something I'm gonna have to figure out. But I love that, it's like I'm painting a picture and I only have 4 colors, and I know I'm restricted, right? I can't use 5. I have to use 4. I find that really exciting, and in this, I think that extends to my love of making Japanese hot pot, because I know I have to do things in a certain order. I know that if I rearrange that order, there is some level of improvisation, but and that is cool about it. But I do have to follow kind of a basic plan in order for it to work and for these ingredients to be cooked and delicious and not overcooked or too raw. I like that that kind of experience.
Amazing. Do you feel like that love of order and procedure and kind of, I just remember you breaking down the Alias pilot script because he did an awesome workshop on Instagram breaking down. Was it Instagram or Clubhouse?
I did.
I think it was Instagram.
I did. Yeah, I did. I think I did a Zoom, but it basically
a breakdown of Alias.
What I did was, and actually that was how I learned to write TV. The first thing that I ever wrote were features, and there's a lot of books about how to write a feature screenplay, but I had never read or found a book about how to write a pilot. And when I started writing TV, that was something I had to teach myself. And I did that by reading pilot scripts, and I really learned it when I deconstructed one of my favorite pilots by one of my favorite writers, Alias by J.J. Abrams. And I spent 3 days and I did a complete analytical breakdown of that script, of like how long the acts were, how, what those story arcs were, A story and B story, how he, structured that pilot, where A and B would flip off, and how they informed each other, and so forth. And I found that by doing that, I really got a strong sense of, the building blocks. It's like if you're standing on the street and you see a house, you just see a house. But someone who makes houses sees the components of that house and also can visualize what steps needed to happen.
Look at those supporting beams.
Right. And you have to start with the foundation and then go from there, right? I think of myself as a craftsman more so than an artist for that reason. And so that love of procedure and order that you're talking about is accurate for me, mainly because I see that it really helps me learn things. I learn things really well when I'm able to sort of deconstruct the process or the product to its core components, and I can discern the steps it takes to go from idea to finished thing.
I love it. What do you think of silly questions to take seriously?
It was really serious. It was.
So should I name it something else?
I like that name. It's
okay,
good. Don't
we're
change
sticking with it until further notice. I have the very last question, the important question.
Yeah.
Are you okay?
I would say that I'm hopeful.
Good.
I'm hopeful. Am I okay? Yeah, but I would say I'm hopeful, and here's why. Because so much of what we do as professional creatives is dependent on faith, right? We have faith, or we have to have faith that our efforts will be rewarded and that our dreams will come true. And to endure the highs and the lows, the waiting, the disappointments, it requires hope. And the process is made better, the experience is made better when you are hopeful. And for that reason, I'm okay, but I would say more accurately, I'm hopeful.
That's a beautiful answer. I love that. I needed to hear that. I like that.
My pleasure.
Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Where can our listeners follow you?
Twitter, direct from DZ, Instagram, Daniel Zucker, Zucker, and Clubhouse at Daniel Zucker as well. Thanks.
Beautiful. Anything that you're working on that you'd like to share, or is it secret?
I'm doing 2 pilots right now, and I'm putting together a movie that I'm directing. I can't speak too much to them, but I invite you to stay tuned.
Hell yeah. Stay tuned, you guys. More Danny. Danny, thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure.
You are awesome.
Thank you. So are you.
Thank you. This podcast was produced by Jason Crow and me, Pamela Portnoy, with music by Jordan Ross Weinwald. You can follow the show on Instagram and Facebook at No One's Okay, and please don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. We love kind reviews. No One's Okay is also on YouTube, so if you want to see our faces, please subscribe to our channel. An extra special thank you goes out to Sean Moore, Claire Palmer, Jackson Palmer, Tiffany Haymoff, and Alexa Marie Anderson. This podcast was recorded at Soundworks Studios. Thank you so much for listening. See you next time.